This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the finish line in sight for the State Department's modernization plan, small business secrets for teaming with the big guys, and an industry opportunity to serve the Air Force. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. October marks the 3-year anniversary of the State Department's plan to modernize American diplomacy. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, debuted the plan with 5 pillars in October 2021. Richard Verma is Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources. Mr. Secretary, welcome. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, coming to the 3-year anniversary of this plan, what are the markers that you've hit, and what were those 5 pillars? How did those 5 pillars kind of guide you to get where you are today?
Yeah, thank you so much and for allowing us to highlight this, because this is such an important effort to serve the American people around the world, to improve our State Department capability and capacity and make sure we're managing our resources effectively. So we took those 5 planks and we basically designed 3 pillars to this workforce and modernization effort. It had a critical missions component to making sure we were doing those right missions for the American people. Secondly, serving our workforce, and then how we were using technology and risk. So on the critical missions, we've stood up a new cybersecurity bureau. We've stood up a new global health bureau in the aftermath of the pandemic. We have new efforts on climate change, commercial diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy, and how we compete with China. So creating a new set of capabilities, trainings, and impact in the State Department, so critical missions. The workforce track has been so important, and just as a reminder, we've got 80,000 people, 270 locations around the world. So it's a big workforce. We wanted to make sure we had the incentive structure right, that we had a diverse workforce, that we were retaining key people, that we provided professional development opportunities and career mobility, and that we were actually compensating our locally employed staff fairly. So workforce had a big part of this modernization effort. And finally, on technology and risk, you know, it was 23 years ago that Colin Powell called for an internet connection on the desk of every State Department employee. Now, I'm sure a lot of people don't want that internet connection today, but we've come a long way. First ever enterprise-wide AI strategy to use artificial intelligence. We've got new chief data scientist and his team doing an incredible job, a chief information officer that comes to us with a ton of experience. And we're also just improving the way we utilize technology for people's daily lives. So a lot of progress in a relatively short amount of time. You're never really done modernizing. We look at the global landscape that confronts us. I've been to 45 countries and 65 of our missions just in the past 18 months, and you take into account all those learnings and you try to make the State Department fit for purpose and responsive to the needs of the American people.
Given that you're never done modernizing, how did you and your colleagues at State establish metrics at the beginning of this to know that 3 years in you're on track, or you need to kind of rethink things?
No, I think that's a really important part to give the workforce and frankly taxpayers confidence that we're making progress. So we actually have dashboards, we have strategic plans for each of these areas, and the work gets deployed across our enterprise, and you can actually go and see our progress. We have a State Department modernization website. We have a dashboard that shows you the progress in these 3 areas that I've mentioned. Look, I'd say we've checked off about 2/3 of what we had set out to do. And again, the next administration, a new team, will certainly have a different view on priorities, but the overall priorities, again, are to take care of the workforce, which, again, in this area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia do such an incredible job, but again, around the world, you know, have that kind of great customer experience. You know, just say more people than ever before have a passport. You know, 52% of the country has a passport. That means more people interacting with our Bureau of Consular Affairs. So making sure the customer experience is good, and then managing those resources that the taxpayers have so generously kind of allocated to us so that we have an impact. You know, the President and Secretary of State like to say that foreign policy starts at home. And so we've got to be able to demonstrate to people across the country that we are having an impact in their lives, whether it's on gas prices or supply chains or opening up foreign markets, frankly keeping the world safe and secure, writing the new rules on technology and all the advances that are happening, and frankly dealing with the threats that are happening too. And I think we have a very good case after these last 3.5 years under the President and Vice President and under Secretary Blinken's leadership.
We just have a couple of minutes left. How did you look at some of the individual pieces? You mentioned artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Secretary Blinken talked about recently digital solidarity as the State Department's North Star. How did you incorporate some of those elements that came along after, I imagine, you developed this plan, incorporate them into what you were doing?
Well, we have to be incredibly agile in how we do this, and technology is a great example. The advances in technology are happening at a speed that we have to keep up with, and we have to look at what our role is. So our role, if you think about artificial intelligence, for example, it's setting the rules of the road, it's developing the global architecture internationally. It's also then making sure the State Department is using artificial intelligence responsibly in a way to improve our work. We think we can save hundreds of thousands of hours on some report writing and other kind of tools that we have in place today. But that's how we try to work together. We work together with private industry, with nonprofits, with research institutions across the country to try to do our work a little better. But it's tough to keep up given the speed of change. But that's okay. That is the world we live in. It's very dynamic, very fluid. The State Department is out in the front lines. We are being asked to do more things in more places in the world than ever before. And I come back from each of those trips, and I know the Secretary feels the same way, really inspired by the team of people that we have.
We have about a minute left. You've emphasized the workforce, not just here, but in the work that you've done, the speeches I've seen you give and so on. How do you know, when you're thinking about that customer experience from your employees' perspective, how do you know that you're delivering for them what they expect to be able to then turn around and do the job that you want them to do?
Yeah, so we do a lot of surveys. We actually go out and talk to the American public. How was your experience working with the consular team, and we learned some lessons. Post-pandemic, we got behind on some of our wait times, whether it was for passports or people overseas waiting for a visa to come to the United States, and we took into account what their customer experience actually was. We have tried to improve that dramatically, and I believe we have. Wait times, again, on passports and visas are back to pre-pandemic. We've rolled out now online passport renewal for the first time. We are using technology in a way, again, to serve the American people. And we're going to keep learning from them and hopefully delivering high impact, quality service for our country.
Mr. Secretary, it's great to have you on the program.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for your time today.
Appreciate it.
You can read more about the State Department's modernization plan and find links to it on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, small business secrets for teaming with the big guys. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. The new TV show Better Contracting, Better Outcomes is available on demand now at fedgovtoday.com. You'll learn from top executives at NASA, DoD, Social Security, and more, plus industry experts that are leading government-industry partnerships. Discover their strategies for improving acquisition efficiency, achieving mission success, and driving innovation through federal contracting. Better Contracting, Better Outcomes, presented by the National Contract Management Association. Watch anytime at fedgovtoday.com. Welcome back. Federal agencies are using the Defense Innovation Unit as a model for connecting with small businesses that haven't traditionally worked with the federal government. But acquisition professionals across government say big companies can play a role in bringing more small businesses into the GovCon space too. Larry Reagan's Executive Managing Director of the Civilian Market at Maximus. Larry, welcome. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining me. What are some of the best practices for both the big guys and the small businesses to get together to be able to serve the government in a collaborative way?
Thank you, Francis. It's good to be here, and this is an area that Maximus takes very seriously. We've engaged with the small businesses a lot. As your previous discussion indicated, the workforce management and even tying them together as a large business, we use those small businesses to help build up the workforce and keep the workforce engaged. It's been something we've been very proud of over the years. So, some of the challenges that we actually face in getting the right ones together, there's a culture mix that has to actually happen. Are they going to match our culture? We're a company that focuses so much on the mission and driving the mission and knowing what the mission is. The small business needs to be able to blend with us there as well. From a risk standpoint, one of the things that is a real challenge for big businesses anyway is when the government takes a large contract and makes it a small business contract. And now all of a sudden we're not really investing in it. We don't have that relationship with the government. It's really hard for us to manage a workforce like we were talking about earlier. And so that's a risk that makes it very difficult for us to engage. So we try to balance those things as we move forward.
How does a small business demonstrate to a large prime that they're the right fit, as you described, getting the right ones? And how should a prime evaluate the small companies that it's considering teaming with?
Sure. The first of all, from the small business standpoint, come to me, come to the large business with what your niche is. Make sure that you understand your value. If a small business comes and says, we can do everything, that doesn't work, right? Because, like I said, we're mission focused, so we want to know what part of that mission you're going to do. Because as a large, we think we can do everything. So if we're going to have a small, we want a small that we can be proud of and that will work with us. And that's the culture clash. Now, how is the best way of evaluating smalls? That's difficult, because as you can imagine, they come from all different backgrounds. Some are research companies, some are staffing companies. They all have different backgrounds. So we look at them as like the same thing. How do you fit into that mission profile for us? And you know what happens is that you find companies, small businesses that you'll do business with over and over and over.
How do you advise your government partners to evaluate the way that collaboration looks? To say, okay, I think these guys are going to get it right for me on this team.
Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, it really is. It's a difficult thing for the government to look at this team. However, like I was saying, if we can define as the large how that small business fits into the mission profile. You were talking about the State Department modernization. I mean, that covers a lot of different areas, right? But if you had a small that they know fits in that, and the small has past performance and everything there, they can understand it then too.
What kind of examples do you have of where this has worked? And are there situations where you've seen, well, we know in hindsight that wasn't the best fit, and why? I've got several examples where it works very, very well. As a matter of fact, I'll bring one to the forefront here. I'll even mention the small business's name here. It's Chivo Consulting. We've known them for like 10 years, and they're very, very good at that budgeting and program management and interdependencies. So we can partner with them all the time, and sometimes they prime, sometimes we prime. It's a culture mix that really works well together. And that history then you can promote with the government, right? And other places where, you know, maybe the staff that they bring on aren't qualified. You know, you got to figure that out. And sometimes you do have a bad one that joins you, and you have to just move on then after that. Quick final thought. We have about a minute left, Larry. It sounds like evaluating culture is maybe the most important part of all these relationships. Is that a fair read on my part?
I think it's a very fair read, to be honest with you, because if you're going to be together for 5 years on a contract, you got to have some sort of relationship that's going to work, and there's got to be a trust on both ways.
Larry, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Francis.
You can read more about small and large businesses teaming on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, an industry opportunity to serve the Air Force. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
the recruiting of the workforce, it's such a diverse group. It's a much more diverse group. It was easier. The message could be far simpler, 30, 40 years ago. But now when you look at the workforce and the wide range of people that can serve in those 100,000 jobs that are needed, you need the 25-year-olds, you need the wisdom of the retired veterans that are coming back to support. But then you also want folks that really can go in for the long haul and really see and have grown up in that culture and really can bring and really embrace that culture. So you need all kinds of that variety of people, and the recruiting strategy is tough because it can't be a one-size-fits-all. It really has to be pretty diverse.
Welcome back. The Air Force is reviewing feedback from industry now about how it can collaborate better with its industry partners. It took that feedback most recently at the Department of the Air Force Information Technology and Cyber Power event in Montgomery, Alabama at the end of August. At the Billington Cybersecurity Summit in Washington last week, Venus Goodwine, the Air Force Chief Information Officer, tells me how she thinks successful collaboration with industry should work.
So when I took over the role a year ago, I said in my acceptance speech, if you will, it was important to me to have industry partners, and that I also had transparency of IT spend, and I deliver capabilities. So this year at DFIDIC, now that we're one department, two services, it's called Department of the Air Force IT Symposium, it was important that I show over the past year what I've done. So I was able to really highlight some of the capabilities we've delivered over the past year with the help of our airmen and guardians. One, we have an innovation landing zone, which one of our brilliant, innovative airmen created a mesh network that can be used not only by the Air Force, but the Joint Service. We then, of course, have launched our generative AI as a result, NIPR GPT. Also, we know that we've awarded our Wave 1 contract. We have over 200,000 airmen and guardians that's going to receive services as a result of that. So it was some of those things that I wanted to highlight, and it was important for me that I highlight on the stage and give them, their credit for taking the enterprise capabilities that I deliver and using them as intended, because that's what I see my role as a CIO for them.
One of the things you've always been really deliberate about is talking to the end user and trying to understand what she needs you to deliver, and not just figuring out for yourself and deciding this is what the department's going to do. What kind of feedback did you get at that event in particular, but more broadly in the past year that you've been in the role, about here's what we need on the front lines?
Absolutely. It was loud and clear. As you know, the Secretary launched our Re-Optimizer for Great Power competition across 4 different, I'm going to call them lines of effort, developing people, delivering capabilities, readiness, and of course our projecting power from our installations. And so using those 4 lines of effort, I heard from the mission owners, here is what I need. When they think readiness, not only of airmen and guardian, but readiness of technology. And so that was important to me, that I can demonstrate that I can take an enterprise capability like the cloud and have it available at the edge, which enables decision advantage. Or that I could take a capability, again, like generative AI, and use it in cybersecurity to ensure that I can deliver secure, resilient, and defensible IT that they can use. So it's those types of things where I heard them loud and clear, but it's also tied to the CIO strategy. As you know, I have a multi-year CIO strategy with 6 lines of effort. And so really with their feedback into that strategy, I had an idea of the requirements. And also once I got the requirements, I also asked industry, how do you understand that when I send a message, how do I know that message is received? And so that's that partnership with industry that's so important. So it's not only hearing from internally, it's also hearing from industry how I'm communicating what we actually need and the problems we need them to help us solve.
Well, and that's, as you were talking about those conversations with the end users in uniform and civilians, it strikes me it's just as important for them to understand that you understand as it is for you to understand what their needs are. Is that a fair read on my part?
Absolutely. A full circle moment, right? It comes in with the requirement. I interpret that requirement, and then I give it to our acquisition community, and then they come back and say, here's what I heard you say. You know, kind of, you can't do the telephone game, right? We try not to do that, but really sticking to requirements. And before we ever spend a dollar, we understand what does the end look like. And so that has helped us to be successful in delivering exactly what we know our airmen and guardians need. Now, we're not there, but we are delivering critical capabilities, even in our zero trust. We're in our second year of zero trust. And I will tell you, between microsegmentation, you know, comply to connect, what we're doing with our data and AI, all of those things are helping us meet the DoD CIO's intent to be target level by 2027.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're in your second year as the Air Force CIO, but you're not in your second year at the Air Force. And so I wonder what you've learned. You talked a little bit before we turned the cameras on about the importance of acquisition to your job. Yeah. What have you learned about how to use acquisition as a tool to get what you need in order to be able to execute on the strategies and so on that and the lines of effort that you've described in this conversation?
Partnership, right? I say it 3 times because now I know we really got it, but that partnership with acquisition in the beginning, when we start in the beginning, in the requirements phase, with all the stakeholders around the table and said, this is the problem we're trying to solve. And first, that we all agree on the problem we're trying to solve. And then we develop what would be the courses of action. And then we can give that to the acquisition community. And then they use all the FAR and the DFAR and everything they have to develop the right acquisition strategy to meet our need. That has been very successful, is that partnership in the beginning and then the communication throughout. So I cannot stress enough upon the partnership I have within the building and also within other areas throughout the Department of the Air Force.
You talked about Nipper GPT, and Alexis Bonnell was on the FedGov Today podcast recently. That's in the archives at fedgovtoday.com. In talking to her about what you're doing there with generative AI, it strikes me that that is something that I imagine you'd like the other services to be able to look at and say, we can just use what they're doing instead of having to create it on their own. Was that intentional, or is that just maybe a happy byproduct of what you're working on?
I'm going to say it's a happy byproduct. First of all, thank you to Alexis Bonnell and her team at AFRL for being innovative. Because I always tell her, you are my technology risk agent, right? Because she has the ability to, really solve and mitigate some of the risk I would have for technology we want to use. But Nipper GPT is exactly one of those ways in which she's done that. There are a lot of large language models. And so what Nipper GPT has done is allowed us to experiment with multiple LLMs. And so the end game is that we have a front door through Nipper GPT, but the back end could be in an LLM, but we build use cases as a result of this experiment, that which LLM is best for which use case, and that we understand the total cost of ownership of even using Gen AI, because the ultimate goal is time back on mission for our airmen and guardians.
So I think that's the answer to my next question, which is, how do you evaluate not just Nipper GPT, but any of the things that you're trying to add to the mix of tools that you have available to you to demonstrate, okay, this is working well, we want to scale this, this is something we maybe need to revisit or just let go?
It's the use cases that we're developing. So we're asking airmen and guardians. Right now in Nipper GPT, we have over 80,000. And we have other tools that we're right now evaluating through the provisional ATO process with DISA that will also allow us to do the same thing. They have a front door and their back-end LLMs. And again, this experiment allows us to say, if this is the use case for, let's say, I want to develop, a medal. And so I need all of our airmen and guardians records to be fed into this secure large language model, and then it then generates the medal of choice, whether that's, our medals are Legion of Merit or Meritorious Service, but it allows it to do that. That first draft is what gives airmen and guardians time back on mission. Yeah. And so, but the other thing we want to take a look at, how do we expand that to do other use cases that may be more mission critical, decision advantage? How do I develop COAs, courses of actions as well? So definitely looking at the particular use case and the return on investment. But the other thing we're doing, and kudos to my Space Force, they just initiated and launched a hackathon through human-centered design so that they also can develop space-specific use cases. But that doesn't mean that the Air Force can't benefit. So at the end, we will have what we call a catalog of use cases already pre-vetted, pre-developed, and it becomes just a catalog of use cases for our generative AI.
All right, well, we have about a minute left. You mentioned zero trust earlier and how you're on track to get to 2027, according to the vision that John Sherman and now Leslie Beavers are tracking. What are the steps that you see between now and then to get you to the deadline on time?
We have a zero trust FMO, our functional management office, and their role solely is to let's execute to the plan that we've developed, and that's why we're on track. And using that plan, we understand the investments that we've made, everything, as I've mentioned, from micro-segmentation and how we expand that throughout the basis, but also with our Comply to Connect, but then our other things as you go up the stack as well. What are we doing for identity? As you'll see, we just released our ICAM strategy, Identity Credential Access Management Strategy. We also just released our API strategy. All of those things enable our zero trust journey as well.
You can read more about DFIDIC on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment.
Recruiting of the workforce, it's such a diverse group. It's a much more diverse group. It was easier. The message could be far simpler, 30, 40 years ago. But now when you look at the workforce and the wide range of people that can serve in those 100,000 jobs that are needed, you need the 25-year-olds, you need the wisdom of the retired veterans that are coming back to support. But then you also want folks that really can go in for the long haul and really see and have grown up in that culture and really can bring and really embrace that culture. So you need all kinds of that variety of people, and the recruiting strategy is tough because it can't be a one-size-fits-all. It really has to be pretty diverse.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, more than 1,000 government and industry leaders are converging on Hershey, Pennsylvania for Imagination ELC. ACT-IAC will host it at the Hershey Lodge again this year. It runs October 27th through 29th. It'll feature interactive sessions, keynotes, and lots of networking. You can read more about it and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. New quarterly updates are in on the President's management agenda. Lauren DeYoung-Schulman from OMB will tell you about them and details on the Army's modernization plan from the CIO, Leonel Garciga. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you next Sunday. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.